Let's talk a little bit about wood for a moment. In consideration for some of the things that I've talked about before, concerning carpentry. Jesus Christ was a carpenter. Many people are going to say all different types of interpretations of what that really means, but he was absolutely a boat builder, as his father was. And they weren't high class people, they were working class people, what you would consider middle class in this time, this day. Working with your hands, doing the best with what you've got, realizing the potential within it and bringing it forth. Kind of a fitting occupation for Jesus. So, what can a block of wood tell you if you are listening? Some people, there's a guy who's got a channel called The Wood Whisperer. Love the channel. I think the guy is amazing. His delivery skills, the way he puts his videos together, even his talent as a craftsman, it's great. He's got a great vision. I don't know if he's whispering the wood or if he's listening to the wood that's whispering to him. But I like to see it that the wood, in a sense, is whispering to us. It's telling us things. There's so much to be learned in everything, really. It's only at the point where you really get into something passionately that you begin to realize that there's so much more that it offers you, and that's what continues to fuel that passion for a lifetime and eternity. So we'll talk about grain because, think about all of these key words that are coming up in prophecy, in the Bible. Grain, think about the parable of the wheat and the tares, Matthew 13. And this is Jesus talking about this. Think about Jesus's knowledge as a carpenter. Think about the description of these ancient beings being symbolized as fallen trees, and it's a whole world is there full of explanation for these things that we see, in essence, might be disjointed, but they can be jointed correctly in the hands of the able craftsman. So Jesus is that craftsman. I'm not the craftsman, as I've said. I'm the tool, and I'm the tool that's not perfect, has been through a lot, and it's got some dings and some dents and some bruises. I show the effects of time and the wear of space, but yet in his hands he can do the perfect work. He knows the medium that is to ultimately be worked. The most prized wood for any craftsman is a wood that's considered to have great figure. Great figure. It's unreal how you can relate figure to a feminine aspect, and of course beauty that goes along with it. Everything from a male perspective that he owns, that he thinks is beautiful, is a woman to him, if you will. And then how this connects back to these fallen sons of God that were tempted, and then this dude that looks like a lady thing hiding behind this mask of a lady. The feminism. And then how it relates to woodworking with figure, bringing out that spiritual resonance, of the rough wood. And that's what a craftsman is really after, All wood is beautiful to the craftsman, but ultimately he is looking for wood with high figure to accent certain endeavors of his choosing, making things beautiful and appropriate and aesthetic, not always perfectly symmetrical, but that's the beauty of it, the free form. So a block of wood can tell us a lot. We know about the grain direction, and we know about this thing with sandpaper. And then we understand this thing with Sandy Hook, uh, you know, Hurricane Sandy, and then this Sandman, pretty popular, and then how it connects back to Osiris Orion, and then even the connection with iron that is connected now with a plane, a hand plane used to smooth and cut wood, being the two chief forms for smoothing wood is sandpaper, or using a plane, almost always referred to as a plane iron. Iron, sandpaper, grain, refining, but not destroying. That's where the line stops. The destruction part is where the vision has become skewed, like a misaligned plane or somebody sanding against the grain. And then the tear out and the marring happens, and that's what I'll kind of demonstrate for you here. And in a way, it will, if you let it, if you look into it far enough, it will let you understand what true sin is. Not meaning the moon now and the symbolism, but what true sin is, in my opinion, is going against the original design of the Creator within His creation. That's what sin is. And the wood can show us that. Because the sin becomes the tear out. It becomes the tear. Effectively becomes the terror. It becomes the beast, the monster. It doesn't look beautiful any longer. It's marred. It's disfigured. All of that symbolism will relate heavily to many of these ancient gods, and even this moon figure, this leopard king, if you will. So, how does all that fit? We're thinking about 9/11 with the terror, and then the terrorist, and then how that relates to tear, T-A-R-E, and then we're going to see that it connects to tear, which is T-E-A-R, and then how all of this is just so incredible. It blows my mind, literally. So we've talked about two paths before, but there are two paths in essence. One is leading towards paradise, the other is leading away from paradise. But what you find out is that the two paths are actually on the same plane, but the separation of the path is the direction in which you travel along it. So ultimately, there's really only one path. But people have chosen to look back, to go back, and to want back for what they believe is true and perfect. And instead of moving into the future, making with what you have now even better than the distant past that ever was, that you were only theorizing about at best, based upon mistranslations of other men, hoping that their dreams and wishes of this ancient utopia were as it seemed to them, and they've been willing to commit many atrocity to get back there. That's not how you make anything. That's not how you make anything golden. There's my neighbor who, it's just unreal how this all unfolds. But he loves to sit outside my window and rev his awesome motorcycle up continually. So that might take place a little bit through here, but don't let it bother you. So the two-path correlation can relate now to the piece of wood that we're looking at. This plane literally is the path, okay? But we're going to see that this path can only be traveled correctly in one direction. Now, looking at the grain structure of the wood, we're going to make a comparison with the hair of a cat, the hair of a dog, the scales of a fish, the scales of a serpent. What you're going to find out is that these scales in the natural world, the natural order, the conditional environment, the very thing that they have grown out of, has shaped them into the very epitome of the excellence of purpose that they have adapted into to become the being that they are within that conditional environment that is, in a sense, carved them out that way. They stand as a testimony to the level of adaptation the way that the wind blows, the way that the fish moves through the water, the way that the hand reacts upon the back of a animal as you caress it with fur. All of these things have appropriate mannerisms, and that going against the direction of these things causes discomfort, friction, and in some cases death. All right. Most certainly for the fish, that the scales are turned one direction to achieve a certain amount of fluidity, a type of aerodynamics within the water to allow it to move efficiently and correctly through it. If the scales were the other direction, guess what? Fish would perish. That's sin. That's sin. In essence, we see so many people trying to change the direction of the very grain of their being and still expect to survive within the conditional environment, which has molded them into a particular direction that can only achieve its survival traveling the right way. And we know that that right way is Jesus. But Jesus will allow you to go any way you want. You can mar yourself up, scar yourself up, scratch yourself up, tear yourself up all you like. He's put it out there what the true way is. And it takes effort. It takes understanding. It takes a certain amount of work, both mental, physical, and spiritual, to realize a greater state of being in this world. Truly. So if we look at the grain, this is what we're going to see. I want you to see how you would first identify this, and I'll give you a demonstration of the cuts. Let's take these points right here. Notice that the points are coming out from the surface going this direction, and then they're stopping. The ends of the points stop here, but this part of the protrusion is connected to the main flow of wood here. These overlaying points, now you would imagine like the ends of the points of the scales or the ends of the hairs. So in other words, the hairs are laying over top of each other this way, just like you would pet a cat, or just like if you could pet a fish. You could only pet them one way. You would go back this way, instantly the spikes would catch you. Now if I was to take a piece of cloth, I could rub the cloth across this and there would be no splinters and it wouldn't catch. I go back this way, it's going to catch and go up under these fibers. So the grain direction on the wood goes only one way. One way. And before I give you the demonstration, which we're going to mess this up. We're going to plane it, show you the correct way, and then we'll go against the grain and we'll show you how it tears out and how this relates to the mark of a beast, right? That becomes a terror, that becomes in essence a monster, right? And then he's been scarred, he's been marked. That's what this wood is going to show us, and it's going to help us understand some of the symbology, the metaphor, and then the greater analogy of it all. So it's what I want you to understand. It's no accident that Jesus Christ is this master carpenter, that has the knowledge to tame this unruly grain. This wild grain. It's usually called wild grain, and then you see these beings are called wild asses. You know what I mean? And even peoples themselves. But, you would have to see the people in a sense more like the normal grain. Some of them having great figure, but the great majority just have beautiful lines, that can be used correctly and appropriately by the craftsman. But as we see to these ancient sons of God, they are what becomes the most unruly and take on this feminine form of quality, of which some people themselves are entertaining, in essence, with this sacred feminine. Now, they are unruly in naughty, meaning they're wild, they're just outright, and that's what a lot of people would be considered as chaotic. And of course, this grain can't be tamed by a craftsman that doesn't understand the movement of the grain and how to read it, and then how to cut it. And this is where we would get into the difference between sanding and planing with a sharp iron, because the sharper the iron, or the sharper the sword, the more efficient the cutting action with the direction of the grain. and then the figure is just absolutely gorgeous. But some people are unable to get their irons that sharp, and so they turn to sandpaper, which will give you a luster, but the figure's incomparable. So we see the life action is the slower mechanism that is already taking place by design, that the life itself is rough. And this is where you say, you hear about bringing many sons into glory through sufferation. We go through adversity, and this adversity becomes the friction, it becomes the sandpaper, it becomes right. Life ain't easy for us. It's not perfect. It was never meant to be. This golden age ideology of sitting around a waterfall plucking grapes from a servant, with animals laying together and everything hunky-dory, rainbows over your head, that's not a reality in our past. Our past is rough and tumultuous for a reason, to carve out the most beautiful and adaptive, powerful and strong, independent souls from this world. That's what it's about. It's a solar system, not for creating weaklings of people that have lived a life of ease, but of people that have gone through great adversity and have overcome it. And this is why it's better to conquer yourself than it is for a king to conquer many countries. You know what I mean? So these, in an essence, come down to this iron being a part of the fleet of craftsmen that the Lord has sent to this world. And this is where we get the sons of Orion. But we see that they have failed. They did not maintain their sharp, two-edged sword, that would efficiently bring the people to a greater luster and a greater figure. And that we see that they had turned to the sand, the sands of time, where everything has now taken so much longer to achieve, but they think that they have found some faster way, more ingenious way. But in all actuality, it has been nothing but being shortchanged continually over and over and over again. The luster's never been reached, and more importantly, they have now turned from even this sanding the correct direction to cutting and tearing out against the grain to achieve a quicker state in a rush and a hurry to complete this work. Now they cut any old way that they choose, and their blades are not sharp. They're very dull. So the tear out itself comes about. The do as thou wilt cannot be done in a world that is designed to be only done in the will of God himself. And it's no accident. The wood will teach you that. So here's the demonstration. If the fibers are laying this direction, that means I'm going to have an ease of cut going this way. But if I turn and I go this way and cut into it, we're going to see that it's going to gouge into the wood deep, and then the tear out will result. I won't end up with a clean surface. But if I go this direction with the grain, I can enter into the wood at any plane traveling this direction I like and smoothly come up out of it. Very easy. So we'll make the direction of the cut here, going with the grain. I came up out, no problem. You can see the luster of the piece, even the shine of the piece. It's smooth, there's no tear, the fibers have been cut efficiently. I have been able to go down into the wood and come up out of the wood freely. If I go this direction, it's a different story. The gouge will go in and it won't go any further. The harder I push, now I have to create a force environment to achieve what I want. You get me? I have to seek to enforce the blade. And then this is where you get violence, you get trauma, you get injury, you get people that get hurt and taken advantage of and abused in that type of system. Now, because the wood won't cut, what you're going to see is that if you come out of it, there's your tear. There's your mark of the beast. There's your terror. And there is a very ugly and deep scar, a deep mark a very deep scar, a deep mark, and you would have to go very far now in the proper direction to correct that. And this is where I relate back to the chakras that, yeah, the chakric path is real, but it's going to take a very long time go in the right direction to smooth out what has been scarred and so heavily damaged by these people trying to go shortcuts and working with this iron that's hardly sharp and that's hardly traveling the correct direction along the path. And we see many people are scarred and marked and marred and turned into beasts, walking around like they're glorified, shining with all this great figure. And they're not. And we, and some of us at least, can see them for what they are and how they react and how they, even in themselves now, become spiky, almost like those horns that you see of any beast running across its head and up and down its back. Just as these spiky fibers themselves now are sticking out on top of this tear out. That's the tear out. That's the mark of a beast. But let me show you something here. Is the wood responsible? Now, is the wood responsible for this? No, not hardly. Remember, the wood's the people. The wood is the people. It's the craftsman that's responsible for how the wood is worked. We got to think about these people that call themselves craftsmen and stonemasons and master craftsmen and practicing the craft and all of this thing, and how they have been abrading and working the people and using this sandpaper because in essence they know their irons aren't sharp enough. And then when they use their irons, they only create more tear out. They can't figure out why they cannot beautify this world with all their efforts. It only destroys it further. And then now they feel that they have to wipe the plane clean, if you will. They throw it to the planer and dig down deep looking for the answer. But then you're only thinning out the original material that you were given to work with. Eventually you run out of material altogether, and the cost of living rises severely. The cost of living, inflation of their flames of fire is destroying everything because they couldn't work with it properly. And now they want to blame the wood. Oh, it's the wood that's marked. It's the wood that's torn. It's the wood that we've got to get rid of. No, my friends. It's these weak-assed craftsmen that don't know how to wield the blades of truth. That's who we get rid of. And we'll replace them with willing disciples. Willing disciples, excuse me for that daggone text message that came through in that vibration feature, which should be turned off right now. We replace them with willing disciples, willing apprentices, not of the occultic crafts, but the heavenly way. And that's Jesus Christ. You know, not some mechanistic machine revving itself over and over. Rah, 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 I got power, I can go, go, go. Go forward into your crash, because that's about where it's taking you. Go, go, go. Go, go, gorilla. So there you have a little bit of the understanding. Now, how does this relate to sin, you know? To better understanding the wages of sin is death, and puts you in a state of being where if you cannot maintain your composure set before you with the efficient way to adapt to the environment based upon the potential the designer has given you to achieve, then you are sinning, plain and simple. You are tearing out, and you are not being glorified. You're not being refined. You are being torn. And I want you to know it's not your fault as the wood. You know? We don't destroy the wood because the craftsman has screwed it up. No, we take the wood from the craftsman and give it to somebody else that won't screw it up, and that makes it beautiful and can make it beautiful and will spend the time and the passion and the compassion to work with the wood, not cremate his care of it. You know? You don't make this wood beautiful by throwing it into the fire. Unfortunately, the wood burns up. Only the carbon is left, the residual residue of that shadow of death. Is that what you want? Because that's what the sevenfold brings these supposed phoenixes that need their fire to ascend. Ashes to ashes, my friend. From one ash pile to the next, not from ashes to glory. From dust to dust, from ashes to ashes. So from the dust to the dust. If you trust only in this dust, aka the carbon, which now becomes the ash of this wood once it's been burned by the craftsman who was really unable to tame it, he throws it in the fire. You know, the people are the wood. Jesus Christ is the craftsman. Some of us are his disciples. I'll be back.